today on Tender Seeds, the network, therapy, stories, videos, much more to give you an overall perspective, worldviews, or just a desire that you open and decide to write a book or make a motion picture. Tender Seed, I will be addressing a specific that I find has a lot of culmination of thoughts, criticism. Many cultures deny their own source of inspiration, their own source. Some people just go and do things, and some people live in complete innocence, right? So I believe some of us have been put in a set of walls, and they say, let's keep it that way so it makes more sense in society. Elites and people in society, specific people, have to know this. Rather, you're making money and you have a lot of secrets to yourself. Rather, you've made money or come from a wealthy family and have secrets but don't bother many. But you have a life that you do not compromise your well-being, and you don't compromise others that they cannot make a life. Obviously, there's people that sometimes we like less, so we go around the edges to make sure that they do understand specific things that we don't like in them, right? You've all been there. We clash. It can be two actresses, or it can be two doctors who come together and they don't seem to have the same grounds of understanding, rather from, I would say, medicine. I was going to say a character, but no, they're not actors, excuse me. From medicine to applying one specific law to going into suggesting or talking to the director at the department and just sitting around a table and saying, you know what, all of this done wasn't all right? This doesn't make sense. It doesn't represent who we are. So we have to take it and just not make sure that I can be sitting here and people blush about things. But once it's been, purposely put together and well educated, and we want people to understand the dynamic that they have in their own being. In my case, I believe there's a country, or there's a few countries where they can actually take from that. I'd like to address one specific thing. Whenever we speak about sexuality, some people will deny whom they are, right? I remember when I was very young in my household, we had to grow up with a lot of morality. So you don't say specific things, you don't act specific way. When I started acting, I was very young, as many can acknowledge. I grew up among the entertainment, and I remember there were things that I wasn't ashamed to say. My parents never shamed me. Let's say if you play a teenager who had issues, and she has issues given she's insecure, and then she finds a boyfriend who's a teenager, and he helps her, and then they move on to make a story, and then it doesn't happen, let's say, right? So I'm an actor, I had to go through that, but obviously it wasn't my story. As a teenager, I did not have much, and you hear a lot of people say that, and it's very, very sad sometimes. I believe a good balance. I remember talking to my mother, and we all made peace. I never bid or had issue with her for that. Maybe for other things later in life, we really have to be specific. And then a lot of women will say there's moments where we don't want to have to deal with our mothers. We really want to, move and make our livings properly, and great about whom we are, or decisions, or just making things our own way. But I remember being a teenager, there's people that really lemon things, and I never blamed my parents. I wasn't like, oh, I hate you guys. Like 30 years later, or, not 30 years, but many years later, I never felt that. But I believe it's always nice if you're a teenager, if you have a good experience, if you can live a good experience, if you can really develop yourself in a self that makes you feel reassured that you're really taking a good direction in your life, then that's absolutely great. I believe educating a person, going to school and learning a lot from others, that's also great. If you're alone as a teenager and you're going to meet people, that's also great. Don't take it wrong on you, but I'm stating this as an example because I'm trying to get into the sexuality conversation without making anybody uncomfortable. Some people at a specific age, they deny their own truth. So it means I can show this to society, and then behind closed doors, I can view whatever I want, and then people won't know, or then this group will know. And then this is the thing. I'm not judging, right? I can judge. Some doctors have papers and then they go ahead and judge. There's people that use God. Let's keep it short and sweet. How I see it is that people make a decision. So that has been discussed. But more than that, it makes them inclined about what they truthfully sense. So sometimes seeking that or having that experience doesn't make you the worst of evil. Obviously, I'm not saying to people, go in front of cameras and tell everyone, that would be like, seriously, or people are going to be like putting a camera on me, is that you, Jennifer? And the people are just going into a divergence of whom I believe a chaos that shouldn't be. I believe what's more proper is that people can actually assess their own, they have to have their own assessment, right? They're having their own assessment of what they want, having a sense of truth, and then addressing that. So if I can say another example, and I do believe a lot of people, some people grow up in specific households or into the entertainment, and people are obliged almost. So you have to follow specific rules, right? You have to be pleasing to specific people, and it's all great, but you have to do your life also. So for me, it always mattered. I remember when I was young, talking with many specific doctors, and there was doctors who their morality was the biggest standards. So whomever had not followed that, I remember by one person, it was like crucial how it wouldn't be all right to make one sweet mistake, right? A little more than a kiss or something, God forbid. And there were other people that for them was like, Jesus, how can they be that way, right? We're living in another society or times have changed. And truthfully, I believe in the latter one. But if I can really speak about saying what I think has to do with the mind without pushing, without hurting or harming a person. So whenever we use all our good memories for a lot of people, they say, truthfully, is that we want to talk about a memory. Some people wish they would forget things. And some people, for a specific reason of being unsteady, have forgotten specific things. I believe a lot of people can put themselves and sit in any place and be like, true, I forgot that. I don't remember seeing myself that. I remember going through things and I never imagined, even for fiction, I put myself through much, and then there's moments where you have to live your truth and you have to acknowledge specific things, but it doesn't make you miserable unless you make it, right? People have to be very much accepting of their own specifics. So if that's what you wanted, then you found that. There's things that you cannot accept. I remember talking about videos when I was abroad. I had to discuss it. It was all made for a production. It was very, very specific, the story. It was a beautiful, beautiful story, and I'm not going to go into it because I don't want people to lose their train of thoughts. But it's so beautifully done that it gives the person the chance to take one decision or the other. So whatever alternative you decide and with whom you leave, there's a happiness there. It's not like you will be unhappy and your life will never make sense, because that's not the purpose. And sometimes we go through those moments. Sometimes, it can be very, very long that you don't find a sense, and you kind of turn around. You have to look around and be like, why aren't things making more sense? Why aren't they functioning? So not denying is a good thing for your own self. Obviously, going, and what I brought is you don't have to go in society and go ahead and tell everyone, but you kind of have to know how you regard and disregard specific rather people, opinion, or specific. I'm going to give this example. When I was very, very young, I lived in an area, and that area was Saint Laurent. So it was all of the immigrants. Like, that place was renowned to be from, like, every culture was there. Spanish, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Arabs, Turkish, any culture that you can actually put, every child that you can imagine would go to that place, or actually grew up somehow in that place. And there was a few English members, there was a few Francophones, but not much. And I remember being very, very young, and this is the experience I got, and I think it was a good thing. For me, it was an eye-opener that people have those decisions to make. There was this Frenchman who was requesting specific things to another lady, and he was very specific in saying, I want a French woman. So I'm not making this story up, but, and I sound like people that do make up stories. People were being regarded closely. Who's making but truthfully, in that sense, the men requested a French woman, right? He was a French, and he was more at ease. Rather it was for communication, rather it was for love, but that was a request that was made. And I remember thinking, I was a young child, and usually at that age you don't remember things. So rather your mind is playing a trick on you, or rather you had a vivid memory, given that that's how it goes, right? So I remember thinking that people are not, and it wasn't even addressing me, it was just the moment. I believe that sometimes we seek a part of whom we are, right? So that cannot be wrong. You can't be unwell in that. And I do wish people can understand, because some people, I remember when the French were addressed and people wanted to state that rather their fashion or their sense of approaching love was a very, beautiful, or it was very much inclined to specific, it made them whom they are. So for me, it was never about being against it. I was never against anything. I'm no one in that situation. I wouldn't go to see all the French guys and be like, no, I'm the one here. That would be a bit odd. It would be a very odd thing to do. But also it'd be a bit, I believe people charm others by being their own selves, by saying specific truths. Sometimes they can be uncomfortable. And in this case, it isn't uncomfortable. I believe it speaks of decision that people make, but also of how comfortable they feel. Sometimes we need those moments where you're very much comfortable, where you just feel that somebody took care of you. And then there's the complete opposite, where you have a love story whereas your couple is in your background. They're not the same as you are. They don't remember, going to the quinceañeras, or going to, because nothing is Hispanic. So if they tell you something that, but then they embrace it and they like it, right? So if you take that latter decision, it's all right also. I'm not blaming people, but what I'm trying to bring people to understand is their own sexuality, right? Because sometimes denying and going against a person, I remember there was a guy who once expressed it very nicely. He said, when I spoke to my father, and told him that I wanted to be with somebody, I wanted to have intimacy with somebody, he told me to deny and told me that men are men. It happens. He gave all sorts of explanation, but it was never what satisfied me. So the man would punch himself down. He would repress, and obviously a lot of people can feel repressed. And he would repress until he didn't feel that he had a sense of being. He wasn't even a man, and he wasn't even seeking to be with a woman at some point. And when he was, things didn't happen. So that's not proper. I can't say women go through that, but you can see that in girls. Oftentimes you find girls that they're seeking love and somehow it doesn't happen. And love can go hand in hand with sexuality. So if we put this together and we don't deny people their own well-being, we don't deny their own sense of worth, their own decision, and we don't go into chaos in society. Some people just want to take cameras and just go like, yes, that'd be funny. I went with him, and that, without going into that state. And it's not a comedy, but people, trust me, producers, owners, they make it a comedy. They make it the accessory, because somehow, sometimes it can be very much that way. And sometimes it can be very touching. Sometimes it's I put myself in that shoe where my love or marriage failed. It was almost like a marriage where you have two different people coming together, and it didn't happen. And sometimes I remember using that for a character, and then I felt all lost because you have people kind of expecting you to be a specific way, and then you have to be pretty. You have to understand that as women, we're told to be pretty, and it's fine. I don't think that's wrong. But then we kind of lose ourselves in how people want to perceive us. So imagine if a marriage didn't work, and then people expect all these things, and then you have your own group of family who don't want that. So you all have that chaos people make. It doesn't give a proper sexuality. It doesn't make it like, oh, it's so smooth. You have people, let's get it on. Let's get it on. It's not happening at all. It's like, how can it never, ever, true? Like how it becomes truly illogical in people's living and how they make it their own reality. Then there's the other matter. There's people that copy styles. They look at girls and they like the hair, the nose, the boost, or the boost isn't grown enough, so we put it bigger. Or people have health matters, and then they do like it until they have this disdain. So in sexuality, I think it shouldn't be, right? If a man wants to be with the woman, he shouldn't be disdainly disgusted. Whenever that happens, whenever you see that it's not proper, like it's supposed to be attractive. I'm not saying men just go for my legs and don't imagine myself like I can find myself. I'm a fantasy, but I'm not going to say to every person what I do or what I would do. And I don't tell men to, I find it funny, like my legs and just go. That's not what I'm saying, but imagine truthfully in sexuality how it goes, right? How in life it's supposed to be not damaging you, not harming you in any sort of way. So if people come together, then why push specific people when actually things can be a bit easier for people, right? It is easier for people to actually come together and make it happen. So among cultures, when I was doing production, it's been almost 5, 6, it's been years that I've been trying to develop. So I remember talking to specific people and I wanted actors. And I remember thinking when I was developing, because one thing is therapy, one other thing is psychiatry. If you talk to a doctor, and that's more my style, I would go to him, listen, this is my weakness, or this is something that I don't like. So I would want to address it, and then, I can do my life. And a lot of people, I think they can acknowledge and just, you move on, and it's very, very nice and sweet. Some people have to talk and talk and talk, and they make it, some of us, we write instead of some of us go for runs. I used to run a lot. It made me feel very much well. So different people have different approach, but at the end of the day, whenever we speak of sexuality, it's because rather you're opening yourself to that world, or rather it is part of who you are, right? So a lot of people sometimes, I remember guys when I was young, there was one specific guy who loved to make fun of me. He was like, I have so many girls. And I remember I was like, almost like the friend who asked, he saw me as a friend who acted like a witch. And I used to tell him, and I remember, because we're like colleagues of classrooms, I remember telling him, you're not only not logical in life, because you think yourself too much, but it gives you, it was charming. It gives you the insight that you really like to push people's boundary. And it was true, people want to see what they get out of you. And to an extent, it can be very, very marvelous. It keeps it like a classroom kind of vibe thing, and then people get along. But then there's, I believe, a boundary we often have, or it happens more so if we have a love interest or something's going on. So that also, and you see that in teenagers, right? You do see it, but then you see it again in a different mindset and how people develop within sexuality. Because you're going to see men or you're going to see women, and they're like, I have so many lovers, what can I say? And they don't make it a theater thing. They really truthfully go like, what how can I be not accost them when part of this is who I am. And then you'll see another person who they just toss her and they're like, we're really not interested in that person. And you kind of have to pick yourself up and be like, that's embarrassing. Or that's very much like, that's what people believe. And if they believe, then how can you, go and people can harm others. I was never a person who they did that, but I remember, I have to be honest here, Jesus, it's very hard. I spoke with somebody and I told them, listen, if people have gone through a lot of traumas and they've gone through a lot of things, I can tell myself that I could be able to, go through things in front of a few people and just, make it up clearly. Because I believe the human mind and the human heart and the soul can go and achieve a lot. They don't have to be ashamed. They don't have to be afraid. They can be all over the place and then, I'll bring it together. So I was the one who said that. Careful what you say because it might happen. And it did to me. So sometimes we kind of go and in fiction, they make it that way. And then in life, they kind of push a door. So unwillingly, I did say that to a person. I was the young, almost like that young person. I got like, oh, I can face a lot of things. And they're like, yeah. But then you kind of have to take it nicely and not take it wrongly. You have to have a sense of your own being, and not letting others obsess over who you are also helps. I believe in sexuality. Whenever we have a couple, it's always good to have this very much endearing, and sometimes people become very dangerous to themselves, but not too dangerous that it's not proper in their own being, right? There's things that will make it always better and better to develop, to live, to sense, but other things can be a bit not good. It can be damaging, and you don't want that, right? You don't want to go to that place where you're not your own self, where you're not feeling frisky or fresh. You don't feel like your own sense of person, and you don't want to feel all distorted. Because sometimes it happens. I remember when I did say that to that person and those people in charge of specific in areas, sometimes they see you as a young person. Depending your age, depending your background, they look at you and like, oh Lord. And I was like, a little. And then you really have to express to them and how things have to be. And you have to really tell them, for specific reasons, given specific things, do make it clear for specific people that it is always best this, but whatever other outcome it is, it is best wish for others as for myself. For mothers and fathers, sometimes they have it a bit hard. Mothers, I remember when I was put as an actress, there was a period in my life where I needed specific people, and my mom was there. Some people wanted to put her. So a lot of people became obsessed with the image of my mother. I remember there was a specific woman, Hispanic, who wanted and they liked it. And then my mom was like, but that's more Jennifer. But then she felt comfortable because she was like, sure, I'm good that way. But then I'm this way. So she related to another thought, or this way because my grandmother was that way. So people go and cross their own identity, but if there's nothing wrong and you don't bother a person, then that doesn't bother anybody. And especially whenever we're talking about something that you like, I believe women, we don't ever think of anything that's in, even men. But I think more women have that tendency to, we don't think about our mothers. There's specific things that, and then there's women that do. And some women have said, I thought, everybody's that way. It's always my mom here. And a lot of people say, no, we really don't have reference to that. And those that do, then they kind of discover why, or why do we always need love? And trust me, I believe we always will need our mother. If people have their mother, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's different. It's a different approach in life and how we grow and how we love also. And sometimes it can be so cold outside in the world. And people say that. But then it can be very much also life is about life. So we take it on and we take it. And a lot of people will say that. So for me, I do say this in English, but I grew up in Spanish. So my crew of people in the, all my years and they were very much Spanish. And then there were like so many immigrants. So it was like a lot of English because all these immigrants had to talk to themselves. So they're like, if I don't understand English, it's all coming through. And then there's people that truly didn't understand, but they kind of got along together. So you kind of have those bonds that were made. So wishing that people don't have anger for that. Wishing that people, because sometimes we go back to moments where from childhood they did affect us. And you find that in couples, and they get all dismissal about themselves. And then you discover things that they didn't like when they were young, and it shouldn't be. So whenever you're implying sexuality, or whenever you're opening, and this is the proper word, opening into sexuality, it shouldn't be something that you feel uncomfortable with or unwell. Depending the age, depending who your teachers are, depending who you are, if you are a sexual person, some people will say it, and I don't think it's a wrong thing. And some people are very, very sexual. They go to, they have all these toys and they do things in front of others. And I believe to an extent it makes a good understanding of who they are and they feel comfortable. I wouldn't go, but there's specific things that I find that it's very, for me, it's very beautiful. And I can say videos where specific positions where the couples are, or what it means of how people see them. And sometimes when a couple are, how I find it very much beautiful, or I find it romantic, and I find it very much, it develops a bond between two human beings. So I don't think that's wrong, right? I admit the choice because I'm not there, I'm not talking about that, and rather here what we're talking about is this matter. And also this is what is more the content of this specific tender seed. So wishing a lot of people don't feel that they have to limit, or they have to limit their own sense of, some women, they find that it's almost like they get their groove on, and some men, they get their thing going on, but they can be truthful with their own being. And I think I say it a lot. My hand goes like, it's a lot of, but it is a matter here. And also it is a matter that has to be addressed. And then there's beauty. I haven't said that. Beauty is a standard that we all have, right? And then you have people that say, I'm not beautiful and I have someone. I remember having a guy say that to all of us. I was like, you guys don't know nothing. I was like, we really don't know nothing. So how can that be? So people, beauty, if something turns you on, and I was joking about the legs, but truthfully, some people, that's what makes them. Some people, it's the hands, some people, it's the breast, makes more sense than just a hand. People have to know that in their own realization, nobody denies that. And then there's beauty in many different bodies. Whenever we see men, and this is for ladies, obviously, we get heat as women because, we see men and you're like, it gets so exciting to see handsome men or men built. And some men are much more, they're smaller, but you're still very much attracted, and that's not a wrong thing, right? I don't think that nobody can make them feel unwell. And whatever decision a woman makes, don't feel that you're not making a good decision or you have to please somebody. But sometimes a person can say, you know what, I see this person for you, because it's somehow, some people see others and they suggest. So if people say upon a suggestion, don't take it wrong. I believe sometimes you hear that from parents or siblings or friends or old friends who remember a person, they're like, oh yeah, she looked that way, so it would look nice. Sometimes people, and then they have this person out, and then they get angry at this, and then that person does. So they kind of bring people and they get together. So Madonna said it that, and I've been using twice. Madonna says that music gets people together. Sometimes specific thing, and sometimes it takes a bit longer. So wishing people can see that their own sexuality is a matter of their own interests, their own opening. Sometimes people close themselves from experiences. Some people close themselves from emotions. Emotions can be very intricate, but then it can be very much important to be in an area, in a surrounding, in your own surrounding, in your own self, taking care of your own being, and not sensing that you can't be a person that feels like a stupid. Some people, they see as a person that like, God, they're so dumb, they miss this and that. And it's true. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes we see other things that happen, simultaneously. So wishing people can go out there and make it. And if they're opening themselves, and morality, I've expressed morality. So if you want to speak with a sexologist, if you want to speak with a person in religion, if people are forcing others, don't necessarily think that's proper. First, it is not. It isn't. So it isn't forcing. It's really a matter of how things open themselves and how life's supposed to be. So having children is great. A lot of people see, a lot of people see it from that. I remember a few years ago, it was a lot of how you see it, and till this day, you have a lot of women saying, "No, you have sexuality because also you have children, right?" And it makes sense. To an extent, it does make sense. And then some people say like, no, right, no, you don't have children. And then you have all different people, because some people don't want to have children, so they go into the opposite spectrum of that thought. So you kind of have to merge those thoughts and see that, yeah, people have sexuality, they have children, but some people have sexuality and really, they don't go into the children. And then you have to meet people that want to have the same thing, but not also the same thing, that they really can do much in their own living, right? If you can't do much in your own living and you have to bring others to that extent, then it doesn't make sense, right? It's different being stuck somewhere and you're gonna get yourself out than being stuck and you're not doing anything, right? It's very, very different. So that's the same thing for sexuality. And then another thing that I've been saying, proposing yourself on a man. You often see that in friends, or sometimes when you have a big crush. Sometimes you go and you kind of open yourself to the person, you're like, oh, I wish we can take this or we can do this. And sometimes, some people, it will work for them, and sometimes it creates this discomfort. So people get angry. And sometimes when you hear that, some people get very, very angry. It entails an emotion of angerness. People are like, in stories, and for some people it makes sense, and for others you have to understand that it just doesn't, it is not their privacy. So if a woman wanted to go and kind of, she's opening, she wants something to occur with a friend, or she wanted something at some point, it's not really the matter of somebody else. If obviously somebody tells you no and you keep insisting, then let's go back to every story that's been written on that, or every moment where it happened. Why is that a flaw? Or why isn't it the best for a woman in that moment? Or if it didn't happen, why is it, right? And then you have a lot of people, and you see grandmothers. You often see grandmothers say, oh, because in the heat of the moment, you have specific cultures. And you have to address that sexuality has different moments, or different, people sense it differently. So I believe it has to use logic, but also let things be. The natural flow of things is a good thing, right? And I'm exposing myself. Let's say I go into a man and I'm caressing his shoulder or his head, and I'm leaning to kiss him, or I want something, and he wouldn't want that, and then he doesn't want anything. And obviously it means, whether he's not attracted to me, whether he doesn't want to be with me, whether sexually he's not inclined towards me, whether he has no emotion. So all the list can happen. But that isn't a thing that should stop a person from seeking to be with somebody. Being uncomfortable or being dumb with him wouldn't be intelligent. That is obvious, right? I'm not going to insist. I'm not going to be punched and be like, obviously not. And I'm using my example if it was me. But I think as women, sometimes people kind of have that shame. If you go and lean to a kiss, some people don't have to feel that way. Or, if the story developed that way, I wouldn't sense that it's a shameful thing. I wouldn't think that people, you have to check on them and, strangle their penis or their intimate part vagina and be like, oh, shame on you. I'm not punishing them that way. I don't think that's even something people punish. That's not even something people will state upon, right? So upon this, I hope people can use a great logic. People can use a great living in their own being. A lot of different therapies incline towards doing exercises that are internal. So you kind of have to bring together your muscles so you feel the body and all your, not only the intimate part, but truly all your body, feeling the body, and then really working into the mind of not stopping yourself, right? I think that can be a good thing to acknowledge. So upon that, I hope people can embrace their own living, if either they have their sexuality, whether they're opening their own sexuality, rather they have a sense of their own being, their own morality, their own, obviously it's not a bad thing. In marriages, a lot of people discuss their own, but also not being in the way of their own dismissal. I think some people get in the way of their own, they dismiss their own selves. So wishing people do something that they enjoy. Thank you and have a good day.